The US should bomb China and take out Xi Jinping. That's an idea I've seen circulating quite a bit online, primarily in the overseas Chinese community. And the recent kidnapping of Maduro and the war with Iran have definitely given it a boost. I'm not sure about you, but for me personally, I'm struggling to find a proposition that's dumber than that. Before I go into why it's so fucking ridiculous to even suggest that, I do want to say that there is something I do agree with these people on. I too am not a fan of the CCP. I too think Xi Jinping has made China worse in many ways since he took office. As bad as YouTube and TikTok can be with their content moderation, the censorship on all these Chinese social media is just a billion times worse. It's not even comparable. I'm giving you this context so you know where I stand vis-a-vis the current Chinese leadership, and I don't want this video to be perceived as I'm defending them in any way. With that being said though, now let's dissect the absolute lunacy in this argument that the US should bomb China and liberate its people. First and foremost, what makes you think that people in China would even welcome US bombings? To the best of my knowledge, there's no poll that shows a majority of the population would support a foreign invasion or having their government toppled by a foreign country. If anything, China is a very nationalist country. Sure, you can argue it is that way today because all the propaganda that's been taking place over the years, but it doesn't change the fact that the average Chinese person today has a very strong sense of national pride and would not react positively to their sovereignty being infringed upon. If I had to guess, these people think that the US would be greeted as liberators in China because most of them live overseas and are in their little echo chamber, and they convince themselves that Chinese people currently living in China would react in the same way that like overseas Iranians or Venezuelans celebrated their leaders being either killed or kidnapped. But that line of thinking completely ignores the fundamental differences between China and those countries. For starters, China is not under a million different sanctions like Iran is. And China's economy has not collapsed, unlike Venezuela. I'm saying that not because there aren't issues bubbling under the surface, but the circumstances are just drastically different. And just as an aside, can we stop giving so much currency to what the diaspora says about their home country in general? I don't mean that what they think and say don't matter at all, but how could you possibly say that the people in these diaspora communities accurately represent what the people in their home country actually want? Using myself as an example, I was born and raised in China, right? But would I say I'm perfectly in tune with what people in China want and desire today? Of course not, because I don't live there anymore. Not to mention how convenient it is for these people living outside of China to advocate for a war. Let's say if things got out of hand and China started a draft, their assets are not on the line, their sons and daughters are not at risk of dying on the battlefield. They can just spectate in the comfort of their own home while ordinary people in China lose their lives in the conflict. Now I think about it, it's actually worse than that. You know why? Not only do they not care about their compatriots in China, they don't care about American service members losing their lives either, despite the fact that a lot of these people are permanent residents or naturalized citizens in the US. I feel like to them it's all just a fucking game. It's like, me don't like Xi Jinping, me want Xi Jinping gone, and like innocent people dying on both sides is like a complete afterthought to them. Although to be fair, one of their rebuttals when people point out the human cost in a war like this is that they say the US has a great track record of doing targeted strikes to decapitate the leadership while minimizing civilian casualties. Whenever I hear them say that, my first reaction is, bro, did you just fucking crawl out from under a rock? What track record are you talking about? Have you not seen how many civilians have already been killed in the first week of the war with Iran? And guess what? I even give you Venezuela as one operation in recent memories that had minimal civilian casualties. But at the same time, did you forget that this so-called evil communist regime is still in power? The same government is still running the country today despite the fact that the US has kidnapped its former president. Honestly, I would go as far as saying what happened with Venezuela is the best you could hope for in that situation. When people say the US should take out authoritarian leaders like Xi Jinping or Putin, they never think about what comes next. Who's to say that the person taking over is not going to be more hostile to the US or be more brutal to their own population? Yeah, sure, we did kill Saddam with relative ease, but do I have to remind you what happened to that country afterward? Can anyone say with a straight face that Iraqi people are truly better off today than they were 25 years ago? Sometimes I just find it unfathomable how a person could say starting an offensive war against China would be a good idea, given the documented failures of US foreign adventurism in the last 50 years. You know, these people in the Chinese diaspora community remind me a lot of the Cuban neocons in South Florida, both are equally delusional. I'm just glad that, unlike the Cubans, these Chinese people have no political power, at least not right now. Because you can fuck with Cuba, they're in such a weak position right now and don't have the economic or military power to fight back against US aggressions. But if any US president is dumb enough to think bombing China or Russia and taking out their leader is a good idea, then holy shit, that would be the beginning of World War III and we're all gonna be fucked.